You're number one now. Written by Davis Z. Director. Glynn was in a frenzy. He raced down the line as fast as he could, going at speeds he was never intended to. "Faster, driver, faster," he yelled. "If we go any faster, your boiler will explode," cried his driver. Glynn didn't care. He continued going as fast as his little wheels could carry him. Onlookers all stopped and stared as the red vertical boiler engine whizzed past. Soon Glynn reached his destination, Tidmouth. He clattered over the points and swerved into the main engine shed, a small brick building with 2 rows, just big enough for the line's 4 small engines. "Gladys! Gladys!" he called. "I'm right here," came the blunt, hoarse reply. "What's the matter?" Glynn was now face to face with the railway's number one. Gladys was a strange sight indeed. Built on top of a recycled wagon chassis using an old boiler, she had a wooden boxy cab with her funnel sticking out through it, a small pipe being located where her funnel should have actually been. This was because her working vertical boiler was inside her cab. Her old outside boiler was really just for show at this point. It made her look very back to front, but Gladys was never ashamed of her unusual appearance. "Gladys," cried Glynn, "what happened to you?" Gladys almost let out a chuckle, as if the situation was funny. It wasn't. She was in serious trouble. "My boiler finally gave up," she explained quite matter-of-factly. "The wagons weren't behaving themselves. Kept holding me back. I did what I could, but I'm afraid my old boiler couldn't handle it. A shame. Only 7 years of service gone down the corroded tubes." "Why were you even working?" Glynn demanded. "I told you me and the others could manage it." "It's fine, Glynn," said Gladys. "It was bound to happen sooner or later." "But it didn't have to happen. You should have just... I could have..." But Glynn couldn't finish his sentence. He had been going over this conversation in his head all the way here, and yet he was now at a loss for words. Gladys realised how upset and hurt his little brother was. Her face fell, and she matched Glynn's sadness. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was only trying to help. I just wanted to work again so badly. It's no fun being stuck in these sheds. Seeing you going about with your trucks, and the tramlings with their passengers. I just wanted to help too." Glynn sighed. "You always were a hard worker, I suppose," he said with a small smile. Gladys chuckled, coughing abruptly afterwards. The 2 engines sat in an uneasy silence. The grim reality of the situation hung over them like a thick fog. "Glynn," Gladys spoke at last, "when I'm gone, I want you to be in charge." Me? cried Glynn, surprised. "Yes. The tramlings are still young. They will turn to you for guidance. And with those Wellsworth and Suttery engines coming over here soon, they'll need someone to show them how things are done around here." "But... well, I can't!" "Of course you can. I believe in you, Glynn. This railway needs a number one, a leader, and that is now you." Are you sure I'm the best choice?" "You're my brother. I know you are. You remember the washout of 1908? How could I forget? Probably my earliest memory." "Well, when the tracks started collapsing, and the rails were dragged into the sea, who saw to it that his train of passengers got through safely onto the other side?" All right, Glynn smiled, his face going as red as his paint. "And who helped with the construction of the new tunnel to connect the line back together?" "Well, that was more Topham than I." "Oh, give yourself some credit, Glynn. No matter what, you've always been the most brave, most hard-working, and most friendly engine anyone could ever meet. And eventually there will become a time where you'll get old, and a new number one will take over from you. Whenever that happens, 10, 20, 100 years from now, you'll be ready." Glynn took a deep breath. A great weight had been placed upon him. He was in charge now. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" he asked with spirit. "Just 2 things," replied Gladys. "First, don't let the tramlings in here. I'd hate for them to see me like this." Glynn understood. "Secondly, can you stay when it happens? And she said this next part with hesitation. She almost felt embarrassed for thinking it. "I don't want to be alone." Glynn almost choked on his response. I promise." "Thank you. Remember, Glynn, you're number one now." And Gladys gave him one last smile As the workmen entered the sheds, closing the doors behind them, it was time to take the little engine apart. A few days later, Glynn was resting in the sheds when he heard the sound of footsteps. He opened his eyes, only to see Mr. Bertram Topham Hatt, the man who had built Glynn along with his siblings. "Hello, Glynn," he called. "How have you been holding up?" "I've been better, sir, but I'm getting there." The Fat Controller gave a knowing nod. Glynn looked down at what Topham was carrying. It was 2 tins of paint. One was red, and the other was yellow. "What's all this about?" Glynn asked. "Oh, I'm here to give you your new number," smiled Topham. "New number?" "Yes. Gladys wanted you to take over as number 1, didn't she?" She did," said Glynn. He did feel a little guilty about it. "Don't worry," said Topham. "It should only take half an hour." And so he got to work, painting over Glynn's number 2 and going over it with a big yellow number 1. Glynn sighed contentedly. It was official now. He was going to do everything in his power to make his big sister proud.